Bishop Desmond Tutu was put in charge of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to help bring healing to his nation after the atrocities of apartheid. And when he was asked what kinds of people he wanted to serve on this commission, he said, "I want victims. Victims whose lives have been torn apart. Those who had been raped. Those who had seen their parents killed. Those who had their homes burned to the ground." But he said they cannot have stayed victims. If they are to serve on this commission, they must be people who have forgiven their oppressors. And these people, Tutu said, would be the wounded healers of South Africa. So this morning I want to go deep into the heart of forgiveness. Because if we truly want to be people who are about letting justice roll down like waters, which comes, remember, from Amos 5, if we truly want to be people who are about the work of healing and peace in the world, then we have to be people who are actively engaged in the spiritual practice of forgiveness. And you might say to yourself, well, why does that matter? Why is that important? I can't tell you the number of people I encounter who've been wronged or betrayed or abused or suffered some sort of injustice. And they're carrying this burden with them. And it's weighing them down, keeping them from moving forward. And they've been carrying it for months or years, sometimes even decades. And see, when we hold on to these wrongs, when we hold on to these pains, these injustices, we aren't free. And on this point, I can speak autobiographically, because I lived this way for years. In fact, most of my 20s were spent hanging on to this thing, seeking revenge, saying things like, oh, I know what I need justice, and always confusing justice and revenge. I know what I need that person to suffer, or I need them to suffer, as if this would add to my healing. Or I know what needs to happen, their wrongs need to be exposed, and if I can just expose their wrongs, then this will be the thing that will give me healing. And you know what I can tell you is, this kind of thinking, it led me down a dark path. This kind of thinking led me deeper into addiction. This kind of thinking robbed me of my joy. It kept me from moving forward in my story. And what I can tell you is, in my experience, it doesn't work. Hanging on to that stuff, it doesn't work. Because not forgiving someone is like letting that person live in your head rent-free. And you're worth more than that. Your life is better than that. And see, the irony in the whole thing is, I longed for freedom. And I would have told you, if you'd asked me back then in my 20s, I would have said, yeah, this is about my freedom. Oh, I need that justice. This is about my freedom. I need that revenge. I need to get them back. This is my path to freedom. Man, I wasn't free. And see, if you're sitting here this morning and you're saying to yourself, no, man, you just don't understand. I will never forgive that person. I will never forgive those people or that institution. And if you knew what they did to me, you wouldn't forgive them either. I get it. As much as my experience will allow, I get it. But I've still got to ask you, do you want to be free? I mean, really, do you want to be free? And see, it's like over and over God was asking me, man, you want to be free? Come on, Ryan, you want to be free? Then you have to forgive. You have to. Now, what I've noticed is, when we get in conversations that have to do with forgiveness, we have to do some reimagining. Because all of a sudden, what happens when we get in discussions about forgiveness is we start to come up with some really bad ideas. really bad advice, ideas and advice that actually does not lead to healing. It actually creates more harm in the world. And so we have to do the hard work together of reimagining what forgiveness is. And so what I'd like to do this morning is start with what forgiveness isn't, and then say a word about what forgiveness is, and then look at a couple of prayers that Jesus offers, and look at this Greek word forgive, and see what all of this has to do with freedom. Are you with me? All right. First, what forgiveness isn't. And by the way, I should tell you, earlier in the week when I was going through this, when I was preparing, I had a whole long list about what forgiveness isn't and what forgiveness is, and I was going through it with my wife, Tammy, and she says, yeah, that may be all good and true, but that's way too long. You've got to simplify it. So, 2 sentences about what forgiveness isn't. Forgiveness is not dependent on the actions of others. It is not condoning what they did, and forgiveness is not about forgetting. If you are waiting for that person or those people to own their wrongs, if you are waiting for some sort of confession, if you're holding out for them to apologize, you might be waiting your entire life, and that day may never come. And how often do we tell ourselves, or how often have you heard it said, oh, I can't forgive that person. You see, because if I forgive them, then they may think what they did was okay. But here's the thing. Forgiveness isn't about them. Forgiveness is about you and your healing, your wholeness, your well-being in the world. It's not about them, it's about you. And my goodness, if I hear the phrase one more time, oh, just forgive and forget, I mean, come on, people. Can we be honest? I mean, oftentimes, forgetting is just another way of saying, the pain is too deep. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. I'm not ready for that yet. Well, okay. I mean, you can certainly live that way. But that's not healing. That's not forgiveness. What forgiveness is. Forgiveness. Next slide, please. Forgiveness is about finding peace, healing, and forward movement in your story. It is about your willingness to be brutally honest and name it. And forgiveness always forfeits the right to revenge, because forgiveness is about being free. Have you ever felt stuck? Unable to move forward? Forgiveness is about you taking that step moving forward. And be prepared, because if you take seriously the idea of forgiveness and you embark on this journey, it will be some of the hardest work you can do. Because when you come face to face with your pain and you start dealing with it and you start naming it and acknowledging it, it might be really, really difficult. And see, forgiveness always forfeits the right to revenge. Because we have to be willing, we have to make that decision to take violence out of circulation. And so what that means is we give up things like, well, I'm going to get you back, or I'll settle the score, or you'll get what's coming for you. We give all that up. Why? Because forgiveness is about being free. Now, there's this awful and beautiful story in Luke's Gospel, towards the end of Luke's Gospel, chapter 23, where Jesus is hanging on this Roman execution device, also known as a cross. And he offers this prayer in the middle of the story, and Jesus is dying, he's being crucified, and offers this prayer. And so I want to look at this story to see how forgiveness functions and to see how Jesus models forgiveness. So I'm in chapter 23, verses 32 through 43. They also led 2 other criminals to be executed with Jesus. When they arrived at the place called the Skull, they crucified him along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And let's pause there for just a moment, because do you see what forgiveness is doing here? It is not at all dependent on the actions of the other people, the ones who are creating the wounds, the suffering, and death. And it's not Jesus condoning what's happening. It's not like Jesus is saying, yeah, no, it's good. No, you're good. You just one more nail right here. No. But Jesus also isn't going after revenge, because forgiveness is about his healing, his wholeness, his moving forward in the story, even in the midst of death. Let's keep going. They drew lots as a way of dividing up his clothing. The people were standing around watching, but the leader sneered at him, saying, he saved others. Let him save himself if he really is Christ, sent from God, the chosen one. And the soldiers also mocked him. They came up to him, offering him sour wine, and saying, if you really are the King of Jews, save yourself. Above his head was a notice of the formal charge against him. It read, this is the King of Jews. One of the criminals hanging next to Jesus insulted him. Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us. In responding, the other criminals spoke harshly to him. Don't you fear God, seeing that you've also been sentenced to die? We are rightly condemned, for we are receiving the appropriate sentence for what we did. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus replied, I assure you that today you will be with me in paradise. Do you see the forward movement in the story? Who he is isn't determined by what they do. In the midst of suffering and death, Jesus is still offering grace to the world. Jesus is still offering hope to the world. It's almost like Jesus here is hanging on the cross, and he's giving the world this one final message. Even in your death, you can live free, because forgiveness is about being free. Now, here's what's interesting. The Greek word to forgive is this really fun word, aphiemi. Say that word with me, aphiemi. Oh, you are going to be saying this all afternoon. Say it again, aphiemi. Aphiemi literally means to send away. And it's used 147 times throughout the New Testament. Something tells me Jesus and the early church cared about this thing called forgiveness. And so when Jesus is praying, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing, aphiemi. Send it away, not my burden to carry. I mean, don't you get the sense that what Jesus is saying here is, look, y'all can take my life, you can take my breath, but you cannot take my dignity. You cannot take who I am. Aphiemi. Send it away because I will die free. Forgiveness is always about being free. And now here's the thing. Not forgiving will always be the thing that keeps you from living fully in the present. Does that make sense? Not forgiving will always be the thing that keeps you from living fully in the present. There's another prayer offered by Jesus, and it comes in Matthew's Gospel. It's found kind of in the middle of Matthew's Gospel in this place called the Sermon on the Mount. You are familiar with this prayer because we pray it every Sunday. And now a very typical question asked of a first century rabbi by the rabbi's followers would be this: Rabbi, teach us how to pray. Because when that rabbi would teach you how to pray and you would overhear the prayers of the rabbi would be showing you what was important to him, what mattered to him. And so in the middle of Matthew's gospel, Jesus responds and says, okay, pray in this way. And right in the middle of this prayer, we have this line. Give us this... I swear to you, I know this prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. In other words, God, keep us in the present. Keep us in the here and now. Show us the significance of this moment. I mean, do you notice what this prayer doesn't say? Give us this day our daily bread, and give us our bread for tomorrow, and set up some sort of system so that we know we're getting it next week and next month. No. Keep us present to the here and now. Show us the significance of this moment. And then right after that line, you have this really beautiful line. Forgive us our trespasses, or forgive us our debts, as we forgive those who trespass against us, or as we forgive our debtors. Aphiemi. Literally, to send these debts away. You see, this prayer is about being free from the past. It's about being fully present here and now. The prayer is saying, God, set us free from this. Set us free from the past. How often do we get stuck in the past? How often do we get stuck in wounds that are a year old, or 5 years old, or 25 years old? And you see, not forgiving someone, it will always be one of the biggest obstacles between you and being fully present to the here and now. Because when you don't forgive, when you hold on to that grudge or resentment, you are choosing to stay in the past. And see, not forgiving someone, it's like drinking that rat poison and waiting for the other person to die. It doesn't work. Because forgiveness is about being free. You know, and if you're listening right now and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, here this dude is, he's up there making forgiveness sound all kinds of easy. And all you got to do is let go, let it go. All you got to do is send it away. And you're thinking, yeah, if it was that easy, I would have done that last year. Let me try to be real clear with you. The work of forgiveness is some of the hardest and some of the most scary work I've ever done. It's scary because you don't always know how it's going to end up. You don't always know what you're doing. And I can't tell you exactly how to send it away. I wish there was some sort of formula. I can tell you some things that I find helpful and some things that I think lots of other people find helpful. Like, I know if we're going to start on the process of forgiveness, we have to have people in our life. We have to have that someone, at least one, that person that we can be brutally honest with. I mean, forgiveness requires a rigorous honesty. And get a notebook if you have to. Write it down. Y'all have heard me talk about my notebook. Doing the columns, writing my resentments and my fears, and writing my role in it so that I can get a clear vision of what's happening. And at the top of each page, writing, God, help me be thorough and honest. God, help me to be thorough and honest. God, help me to be thorough and honest. Because my tendency is to not be thorough. My tendency is to leave out the parts that make me look bad. And see, what I can tell you is it takes lots of prayer. And I don't say that lightly. It takes lots of prayer, because you know, if you've ever been on the journey of forgiveness, you know it's not a journey you can do on your own. It's too heavy. You need a power, a source greater, bigger than you. And you see, what I can tell you is it's often this long, long process, and we have to be gracious with ourselves. Like, if you wake up tomorrow morning and you're just a little less angry, celebrate it. Celebrate those steps. Even if they're baby steps, celebrate it. If you wake up tomorrow and you spend a little less of your time and energy into investing in hating that person or hating those people, celebrate it. Good. Celebrate those baby steps. You see, and when we send it away, we're turning it over to God, and this can be really hard, can't it? Because if you're like me, you want to say, no. Just let me control it. I'll do just fine with this resentment. Just let me hang on to this anger. I'll do just fine with it. Besides, if I hand it over to God, I don't know what God's going to do with it. I don't trust God with it. But you know it's too heavy. You know it is too heavy to do on your own. You cannot carry these burdens and in the same breath talk about being in the business of healing. You see, it's to take that thing they've handed you and to send it away. Not send it back. That's revenge. But to send it away. It's to have enough courage. It's to have enough self-worth to say, this burden isn't mine to carry. Why? Because I'm free. I'm free. And I think it's important to note anytime we're talking about forgiveness, that sending away is not the same as forgetting. And don't get the two confused. If you've ever experienced abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, you know that forgetting is not at all a good option. If you're dealing with someone who has patterns, historical patterns of destructive behavior, you know that forgiveness doesn't always lead to reconciliation. I mean, sometimes in a broken world, the best option is to forgive, send away, and move forward. My brothers and sisters, is there anything you need to send away? Because you're stuck in debts from the past. And may I remind you, you cannot send that thing away without having named it. And maybe it's really ugly. And to think of this thing, it brings up all sorts of pain. But you see, this has to happen before you send it away. And this is why I think it's really important when it comes to forgiveness. It's really important to be brutally honest with it. And you know, I posted on Facebook yesterday. I said, I'm talking about forgiveness tomorrow. What's the hardest thing about forgiveness? So many people responded. This is obviously a tough subject. We wrestle with this. We truly do, right? We wrestle with forgiveness. And so many people said forgiveness of self. You see, maybe today you need to make peace with your story. That when you think about forgiveness, it's not about them or that other person, but it has everything to do with you. And you haven't been able to forgive the things of the past. My brothers and sisters, fear me. Send that stuff away so that you might live well with yourself and live well with others. You see, oftentimes the most important thing we can do when it comes to the process of forgiveness is to put a ritual around it. Because rituals mark good starting places and ending places. And so in just a moment, we're going to hear a song, and there'll be a video on the screen with images. And I want to invite you, if there's something that you need to send away, that during the song you could come up to one of these tables, and you'll see boxes on these tables with colored notes and pencils. Name it. Be honest with it. Name it. Write it. Send it away in just a few words or a sentence. And the contents in that box, it's not for anyone else. It's not for me. I'm not going to read these. After the service, I will take everything in there and destroy it. If you're more comfortable and you need to crumple it up or you need to rip it up or you need to fold it, do whatever you need to do to put it in that box. Send it away, fear me. And I recognize it's a process. But perhaps this can be one of the first steps in becoming what Desmond Tutu called a wounded healer. Because what you do with that pain, what you do with those wounds, this matters. And to be in the work of healing in the world, to be in the work of peace in the world and justice in the world, we have to be about the work of forgiveness. You'll also notice a couple of prayer kneelers out if you just want to offer up a prayer. And as always, anytime we do stations, you can feel free to sit and stay seated and reflect. But if you'd like to move and send it away, I invite you to do so at this time. Amen.